Chapter 7. They're here. Staring at the decal in the shape of a red flag with several stars in the upper left-hand corner, Cameron felt the end was near, and it was something that he had not felt before. Not even after being shot in the stomach on the way to the Armory after joining his old friend and former boss, Angelique. Nor 15 minutes ago, during the attack by a gang with a railroad tie armored vehicle. Now, after coming to the quick realization that an invasion had occurred, and that he was now standing inches away from the bumper of what was obviously a Chinese armored vehicle, the feeling of the end rushed over him. Looking around for assistance and seeing none, Cameron began to raise his hands up and place them with fingers locked behind his head. While doing so, he imagined how big the force at the front gate must be for nobody to be firing. Though the engine idling just feet in front of him was loud, he was sure no shots were being fired. Just around the left side of the truck, he spotted movement coming from the direction of the front gate. "Sergeant Smith," he said to himself, watching the man walking over with his rifle at the low ready. Walking as if the Armory had not been invaded by the Chinese soldiers who sat in front of him, where they had stopped just feet away only after destroying those who had been attacking the Armory. Looking up to the driver's side, Cameron mumbled, "What the—" He quickly noticed the man behind the wheel was black. "Is he Chinese?" he thought, turning his attention to the passenger side. "Todd?" Cameron asked, noticing that the two men in the truck were now laughing and pointing at him. Dropping his hands quickly to his side, Cameron was not upset that he was being laughed at, but he was confused and relieved that he had been wrong about a Chinese invasion. Climbing over the sandbags to the passenger side, Cameron met Todd as he climbed out of the transport and stretched out his hand to greet him. "Todd?" Cameron asked, a little unsure since he had only just met him before getting shot the last time. Todd wasted no time shaking Cameron's hand. "Good to see you up and about," Todd said with a slight smile on his face. With the greeting finished, Cameron wanted to move the conversation forward before the teasing began, and from expression on Todd's face, he could tell he was thinking up something good. Cameron already knew his first question was going to be, "Where the hell did you get this beast?" But before Todd could reply, they heard another voice. "Where did you get this beautiful machine?" Sergeant Smith asked Ken, who had just jumped down from the rear of the transport, where he had been manning the Chinese equivalent of the M2 50 caliber machine gun. The W-85 HMG firing a 12.7mm bullet ripped through the wooden armor the invaders had wrapped around their vans like they had only used popsicle sticks. Cameron turned his attention from Todd to the conversation taking place near the rear of the transport, and then quickly walked over to greet his former squad leader when they were with Homeland Security. "Hey, man!" Cameron called out to Ken before he could answer Smith. Surprised to see Cameron on his feet, Ken reached out with his right hand and took Cameron's, pulling him in close while they gave each other a pat on the back. Cameron's condition had been touch and go when he, Todd, and Angelique had left for St. Louis. "You at 100%, buddy?" Ken asked, still amazed to see Cameron up and about. "Hey, I don't want to cut this love fest short, but I need some answers. Starting with, where did you get this, and who is this guy?" Smith interrupted, noticing Gabe coming around the rear of the transport from the driver's side. "Staff Sergeant Gabriel Michaels," Gabe announced, walking over to shake hands after hearing Smith ask the question. With a surprised look on his face, Smith asked, "You from St. Louis, Gabe?" "Yeah, Gabe here saved our collective asses out there," Todd said, walking over and placing a hand on Gabe's shoulder, an action that made Ken wonder what the hell Todd had against him, since it was difficult for him to even get the man to carry on a conversation. At that point, curiosity overruled all other questions as Smith then asked, "You have a son named Darian?" Before Gabe answered, Smith knew the answer by the somber look upon his face. "Yes. That is how I came across your men here. I was searching St. Louis the best I could," Gabe replied, believing he would not see his son again. With a smile on his face, Smith looked at Gabe and said, "Man, do I have a surprise for you?" Then with all the power of his voice, he called out, "Darian, front and center!" Instantly, Gabe stood taller as excitement overtook him. "My boy is here?" he asked, looking from one area of the armory to another. Smith knew there was no need to call for Darien again, but he felt the need to inform Gabe of what his son had done. "Gabe, we are here because of him. Had it not been for your son, we would all be locked up in St. Louis." Filling with pride to hear what his son had done, Gabe's emotions turned to despair at the thought of St. Louis as he remarked, "No, you would be dead in prison. St. Louis has been destroyed." Before Smith could ask what Gabe was talking about, he heard Darien call out from a distance, "Moving, Sergeant!" Hearing his son's voice, Gabe turned to the direction it was shouted from and began running, leaving the group. "Okay, what the hell is going on? What did he mean St. Louis was destroyed?" Smith demanded to know, bringing his attention to those standing before him. "The Chinese have invaded and are in control of St. Louis," Todd said. Shaking his head slightly, Smith continued, "And that is why you are now driving a Chinese troop transport with the flag spray-painted? Fine. Now where is Angelique? She's still in St. Louis?" Ken and Todd looked at each other. Then Ken said, "No. She was taken by Jonathan when we were at what was left of Fort Leonard Wood." "What was left of Fort Leonard Wood? Okay, we need to take this inside, and you can start from the beginning," Smith suggested, confused by what he was hearing. Looking over to where Gabe and his son stood, Smith shouted, "Darien, run this transport down to Marks's men, and Gabe, if you would, Colonel Marks and I would like to debrief you inside." "That is fascinating," Marks commented after the men finished telling the story of their last few days. "Colonel, we must prepare for a Chinese attack. I think it is safe to say, since they are in St. Louis, that they are definitely already on the West Coast," Todd said, following up. Taking in all the information he'd been given, Marks agreed with Todd's assessment and called, "Runner!" A tall, slender man entered the room, and by the way he entered without using proper military procedure, it was easy to tell that he was a civilian who had joined the militia. Passing by the others in the room, the man stopped just in front of the desk. Marks sat behind and waited for his orders. Though Marks thought of correcting the man's entry, he felt there would be a better time. "Take one other person with you and deliver a message to the tunnels." "Sure thing, sir," the runner replied, causing Marks to start dreaming of the days of military discipline. "Chinese have invaded, possible attack at any time, need inventory list, and also, never mind, I will write it down. Come back after you have your horse ready and another rider. Dismissed." Marks knew the information was too important not to be passed on word for word, and as he spoke, he quickly realized it was going to be more than the rider could remember. "Make a hole." The colonel turned his attention from the rider to the open office door, where somebody was calling for people to get out of their way. Marks knew if somebody was making such demands just down the hallway, they were coming to bring him information. Suddenly a soldier appeared in the doorway at attention. "Sir," Marks felt like saying, "Now that is how you enter my office," but instead he said, "What is it, soldier?" "Commander Karnik is back, sir," the soldier replied. "Commander Karnik?" Ken and Todd both repeated. "Yes, and his timing could not have been better," Marks stated as he began making his way to the door. Just before exiting the office, he looked back. "Sergeant Smith, can you get the information typed up for the rider?" Looking up from the paper he was writing on, Smith replied, "Already on it, sir." Standing on the walkway of the front entrance, Marks and the group of men who had followed him stood watching Karnik approach the front gate. Marks was pleased to see the vehicle he and his men had built survive the attack, but he was concerned that there were not others following. "Where are the others?" Marks asked the man who had brought him the information of Karnik's return. "Sir, that was the only one I spotted on the highway before I rushed back here to report," the soldier stated, as every man watched Karnik exit the truck and walk over to the soldiers manning the checkpoint. From Marks's vantage point on the hill, it looked as though Karnik turned and ran back to the truck just as soon as he made contact. "Looks like he knows you are back," Cameron said, taking a guess as to why Karnik returned to the truck so quickly. Nervously, Ken and Todd watched as Karnik drove the vehicle up the drive and directly over to where the men stood watching. The monstrous sight of the truck made the situation that much more charged as the beast came to a stop on the concrete sidewalk at the bottom of the steps. With the truck still rocking back and forth from the sudden stop, it looked as though the machine was thinking about launching itself up to the top where they stood. Karnik's feet hit the ground, and he turned away from those waiting at the top of the steps. With his rifle held firmly in his right hand, he looked around and then waved his left in the air. The men at the top wondered just who he was waving at until they saw the figure of a man stand and begin to run down the road toward the front gate. "Don't worry, it's Robert. We saw smoke from the highway and didn't know if you were under attack," Karnik informed Marks, while looking over at the smoldering pile of twisted metal left from the earlier attack, unconcerned with what had happened, just wanting to know that everything was secure. Karnik faced Todd and Ken as they started down the stairs toward him. "You two fit to fight?" Karnik asked the two men, and then he turned to Kate, who had exited the truck behind him. Before the two men could answer, Karnik addressed Kate. "We leave in 10 mics. Grab extra ammunition and top the tanks off." "Yes, listen, there is something we have to tell you, Karnik," Ken said, attempting to get Karnik's attention. Karnik looked directly into Ken's eyes and asked, "Are you coming with us to get her or not?" Both men were surprised he knew she was gone, much less where she was being held. With his rifle hanging by its strap from his shoulder, Todd patted the H&K pistol on his side. "Just need to top off my magazines and we're ready to roll, Commander," he added, knowing a fellow non-commissioned officer would hate the sound of being called Commander. Ken didn't care what title anyone used, but he was very curious as to how Karnik knew so much. "Have you already been briefed about our last few days?" Before Karnik could reply, Mark said, "Karnik, we need to brief you on what has occurred. I know you want to charge off and bring Angelique back. I also know you are going to do just that, but a great deal more has happened than her capture." Marks had earned Karnik's respect from the first day they met, and when he spoke, Karnik listened. "If it is about whatever this is, it can wait until we return. You seem to have it under control," Karnik told Marks, while pointing over to the remains of the earlier attack. Shaking his head side to side, Marks waved his hand in the air as if he were pushing the smoldering pile away. "That was nothing. What you do need to know is that it seems all major military bases have been destroyed, and the Chinese have established a beachhead in St. Louis." The men waited intently for Karnik's reaction to the information. The severity of the information was high, and all of them had seen those in leadership positions go off the rails after receiving news that did not even come close to what Karnik had just been told. "I expected that. Not the St. Louis part, but a Chinese invasion, yes," Karnik replied calmly after thinking about it for only a few seconds. Cameron frowned and said disappointingly, "Well, that was anticlimactic. Well, I knew either the Chinese or the Russians were about the only country that could have hit us with an EMP. So naturally, whoever did would invade," Karnik finished addressing Cameron's remark and turned his attention to Marks. "I am assuming you already sent a rider to the tunnels?" Karnik asked. Marks replied, "He and another rider should be on their way as we speak. We're going to need numbers. Send riders north, south, and west. Have them tell everyone they see who is able to fight that they can come start here." Karnik stopped to think as a plan already began forming in his mind. Mark signaled for a runner while Karnik was talking. He understood there would be no time to waste and wanted to get things rolling ASAP. Karnik indeed had a plan brewing, and while he spoke, Marks quickly understood what it was. "Marks, have your men find boats, any that are operational, motor or not. Also see if there are any barges upriver." "Anything else?" Marks asked, knowing Karnik was going to be heading out at any second. "No," Karnik answered, and then he turned his focus to Todd and Ken. "Be ready to move out in 5 mics. "You are not leaving me behind," Gabe announced, stepping forward. "Fine, load up," Karnik said to the man he had never seen before. Looking at the locomotive-style vehicle Karnik indicated, Gabe felt he had to make a suggestion. "We need to get there fast, and your ride has to be slow. We brought one in more suited to the mission at hand." Gabe pointed down the hill to the garage where the transport they had come in was being refueled. Agreed. Todd up front with me. Rest in the rear. We leave in 5, Karnik ordered.